Marville #2, probably the worst issue of a comic book I've ever read. Ever. It's awful. It's offensive. Hey, some people have legitimately called me a prude, but I don't think you have to be a prude to be offended by just reading this comic. It is so bad. So bad. So bad. And it's got to be the last time I talk about this Marville. It actually ends up becoming more of a wacky deal because after this issue, which I'm telling you is awful, they end up going through time to talk to God about the meaning of life. It's so crazy. So I'll probably stop this series with this issue and then go off and go back to the Batman Odyssey, which is just poorly written. This is poorly written, offensive, nonsense. Bill Jemas, who also was one of the heads of Marvel at that time, I just hope he got fired for this. I hope. This is the thing where when people say, boy, I miss the old days, they better not mean this, because this is actually this book, reading it in the here and now, and just today, this book would come out as a crazy parody of what pieces of crap want in comic. It's so bad that if it came out now, people could never think that it was serious, and it would be looked at as a parody and be like, oh my God, it's so smartly written, because nobody could make it for real. It's that bad. It's so bad. Marville #2, December 2002, it came out, which is a very important date to remember because you will get some references, pop culture references in this issue that are over 10 years old and just awful. Just awful. It is written by Bill Jemas, if you can call it that. Pencils by Mark Bright, who does a decent enough job, Marvel style, but there are certain characters in this book that are real people. They look nothing like them. You have inks by Paul Neary, colors by Transparency Digital, letters by Chris Eliopoulos. And you start off with a little recap deal, and I'll read just to get everybody up to speed here. Previously, Ted Turner and Jane Fonda, sent their son Al back from the year 5002. Still don't know why they were in 5002. Al falls in love with Mickey. Never saw that, but it's a one-way street. He always seemed to just be friendly with her. Never thought of him falling in love with her. Unlucky in love, Al's lucky superhero with no discernible powers and a little help from his old dog, Alstro, AOL-stro. Yeah, that's supposed to be funny. Al captures the same thief 2 times and earns $200 million in reward money that they just hand him in a big sack. And we get into this. And so they are sunbathing, Al and Mickey. And Alstro's there. They're sunbathing Central Park. And there's Al. He always is talking about with great power comes great responsibility. The big joke is he gets cut off before the responsibility part every single time and then is told he doesn't have powers. This goes on and on and on, and I want to punch somebody already. But the whole idea of this is Mickey says, how do you know this? This phrase that you keep saying. And Al says, everybody knows it. It's Stan Lee, Amazing Fantasy #15, first appearance of Spider-Man. And Mickey's like, well, yeah, but how would you know that? You're 3,000 years in the future. How would you know this stuff about Stan Lee? And Al says, Stan the man, you didn't learn about him in college, the greatest writer of all time. And Mickey says, no. When I was in college, I studied Shakespeare. This is somebody that Al has never heard of and says, Shakespeare? Who's that? This is the joke here. She says, the bard. And then he says, Simpson? Yeah. And then he says, hey, I'm going to use my powers and she cuts him off. You don't have powers. All right, here we go. At this whole point, too, she decides that he's ugly. And she wants to spiff him up a little can't buy me love. Let's get you a little action here. Maybe you can get a lady. So she ends up saying, I'm going to put mousse in your hair. He yells, oh, no, the ozone. And she says, no, it's a pump. All right, so then you're there, and a hobo comes up to him and says, hey, do you have any money? Me and my buddies don't have work anymore. We got kicked out because we're terrible drunks. And so you do have Al saying, well, I have tons of money. He has money coming out of his pockets. He looks like Pac-Man Jones does any night at a strip club. Hundreds coming out of his pockets here. And so he's like, yeah, I have 100 here. Here's $100. Maybe this will change your luck. Well, off panel, you hear somebody say, no, don't do that. That guy's a drunk and a jerk. And plus, he doesn't deserve to work because he's a drunk and a jerk. And also, if you give him money, he won't try to work because he's a drunk and a jerk. So we go and see who this person is. And this person is there on a lawn chair, has a cooler right next to him with some cold brews in it, right? And I'll describe who this is. I'll describe what they look like. You can guess who they are. You'll probably guess it because it's spot on. This guy, barrel chest, looks like he works out 3 times a day. He has the body of The Rock, the face of an angel. I mean, he looks like he's kind of a Bruce Wayne, Clark Kent look, real strong chin, his legs are bulging. He's there, just looking like a guy. He looks a little older. Maybe he's, middle-aged guy, but really put together really well, really good looking. Yes, you guessed it. It's Rush Limbaugh. Ay. And he's like, hey, you shouldn't give away money for free because that doesn't give any of these guys any incentive to work. And so then Al and Mickey, who then say, you're Rush Limbaugh, aren't you? And he's like, yes, I am. Hey, the thing is, though, Rush, is that these people just need a little boost and they'll get back on their feet. Well, then the bum ends up revealing that his name is Peter David and that he is going to try to work with this $100. He's trying to get work. Him and his friends are trying to get work. Nobody wants to hire them. Well, Rush says, no. He's just going to go off and get booze because he's a drunk and a jerk. And then they say, are you Peter David? And he says, yes. Okay. So then we have Rush, who's still sitting there. He's drinking his beer now. And a fart goes off, which you could barely see the first one. But all of a sudden there's a and you end up having Al and Mickey. Oh, Al Stroh, you dog farting all over the place. How dare you? And they say, wait a minute, that wasn't Al Stroh. That was Rush Limbaugh. Now, in a progression of awful art here, you have Rush Limbaugh farting and a bunch of people surrounding him cheering. Then you go to the next panel where he is still talking and says it was him who fought. Nobody's around him then. These people have disappeared. Then in the next panel, the people that we already saw cheering around him now are approaching him cheering like they just showed up. And basically, Al and Mickey are trying to figure this out. Why are these people applauding Rush Limbaugh's farts? And like, well, yes, these are my aficionados, obviously. And now you have a crowd of people. This is the joke, people. You have a crowd of people who are fighting each other to sniff Rush Limbaugh's ass. They're trying to get to his ass. And then you have to mention, because, no joke here goes unturned here. Why are they doing that? Well, that's what he does on the radio anyway, alluding to he just talks shit. There you go. And so you end up with Peter David just say, hey, how about that money? Okay, here you go. And then you get in this whole deal. I did comics. They were shitty comics. Yeah, but I still wrote comics, but they weren't worth it. He goes away. So you end up there where Rush Limbaugh, first up, when he stands up, he even looks like he's in better shape, but says that guy's never going to look for a job. And then Mickey says, well, he said that he's trying to look for work. What are you, deaf? And then Rush says, actually, I am. Mickey says, what? And he's like, it's ironic that I'm a deaf radio host, right? And then Al Stroh farts and they leave. And that's that. That's the scene. Yes, I'm getting depressed. So they go off, and throughout this whole series, but in this issue especially, you have Al, who is trying to figure out what he wants to do How can he be a superhero? How can he do things? He keeps saying he has powers. He doesn't. The only thing he has is money. So he figures, you know what? Giving Peter David money to be a drunk jerk, that made me feel better about myself. I think that's what I want to do. I want to help poor people. I want to give poor people money. So they run off, hail a taxi, and say, take us to the nearest poor people. So we'll get a dated joke, but at least it's in that time where the taxi driver says, well, Enron and AOL are holding shareholders meetings. We'll go there. Right? Oh, my. The acerbic wit on this fellow. Well, then they're in the taxi, and Mickey says, hey, aren't you that guy from Taxi? 2002. Everybody wants to, get on Judd Hirsch's tip here, which I assume because it doesn't look anything like Judd Hirsch, but I'm assuming that's who they mean. And he says, yeah, I got typecast. Now, also, he says, where to then? But it's out of line with them already of mentioning where they're going. So we get more of that. So they're taken downtown. And Al is going again. He's Pac-Man Jones. He's making it rain downtown. He is handing out money left and right. Here's a poor guy. You take this. Hey, old lady, have $100 bill. Little girl there, go get yourself some lollipops. Get yourself all the penny candy you can with the $100 bill. And then these guys come up that look like they're, I don't know, they're pretty much they're like the McDonaldlands gang grown up and gone bad. You have every person in this. It's every ethnic, everything. It's like I said, it's the Burger King Club, but now they've gone bad and want to slice people. But they come up and say, hey, can we have money? And I was like, yeah, here. And then Batman shows up. Batman shows up and starts beating the crap out of the Burger King Club and just destroying them. This one guy, he is bonking him on the head so hard. He's using the double-fisted bonk. I have mentioned to Eric, I hate that move. The double, I think it's nonsense. You really can't go really well with the double-handed interlocked finger bonk. But he's doing that. It's working for him because he's bonked this guy's head to legitimately being Quato now as his stomach head where he has to lift his shirt to talk. He's not dead. He's just Quato. He's going to free his mind. Wait. And so while that's going on, you have the guy pleading with Batman. What did I do? Batman says, I'm doing this to avenge my parents. The guy says, I didn't do anything to your parents. And he says it's symbolic. Black Panther shows up, starts yelling at people, saying, hey, everybody, halt in the name of Black Panther. Well, you have these two guys there, one with a long ponytail, real long ponytail. You know that thing's going to be grabbed. These guys, well, hey there, bro. We can't help it, bro. The Iron Man wallpaper plant, it got closed, bro. He says bro like 7 million times. Well, Black Panther's like, what? The Iron Man wallpaper plant got closed? What happened there? Well, Iron Man out of nowhere shows up and says, oh, yeah, I moved that to Mexico. And so you have these two guys, and Black Panther looks surprised. You have these two guys like, 1,000 people lost their jobs. The neighborhood, we're in shambles. Well, Iron Man then, he don't like to hear that. He grabs these two guys and pretty much slams their head together to pretty much kill them. There's blood everywhere. But as he's doing it, remember, Black Panther's there with him. He says, I know I destroyed the local economy, but you can pay Mexicans $1 an hour and they still work like N dash. And Black Panther says, careful. You can get in trouble by saying bad things like that. And then Iron Man says, thank you. Black Panther's fine with this, by the way, and those guys are dead. And so, then that's what they get. Well, it's funny, too, because I swear they're dead, but they're not. Because then the next panel, Batman has ripped this guy's arm off, one of the guys who was supposedly, in my mind, dead, rips his arm completely off and starts beating him over the head with it. While Mickey and Al explain that they should give money to the poor and not just keep it to themselves. Al says, hey, you know what? The amount of money that it takes to light your bat cave, you could actually fix crime. And I think that what Bill Jemas is saying in this is like, hey, you spend all this money to fight crime, But if you would just end up giving the money to the poor, all this, there wouldn't need to be crime. But he doesn't say it well. I'm actually guessing that's what he means, because it's hard to tell what the hell's going through his mind. Well, when they're saying this, you guys, you should give your money. I mean, you do end up having Iron Man, Batman, and Black Panther. All three have a lot of money. So, hey, why don't you guys just give your money to the poor to stop the crime? Iron Man, who legitimately, if you read this, you're never going to like Iron Man. Again, he says, I think we found ourselves a couple of liberals, boys. And they are about to kill Mickey and Al. They are going to kill them. You know what? They don't get a chance, though, because usually in these situations, it's the bad guys who are there, and then the good guys show up, right? This is how comics work. Well, in this instance, you end up having Bill Jemas. He's going to turn the tide. First off, he's made the good characters into pieces of crap. Well, a puff of smoke comes, and all of a sudden you get pretty much, I mean, it is the strongest character in comics and Marvel comics, but even DC, since it is Batman. If you ever want to talk about, and people will do this, they'll go down the line. I don't necessarily love the way it goes like, well, Batman got beaten up by this person and then this person beat up that person, and then that means that Batman and this. It's almost like what people do to try to make themselves feel better in sports. Like, I'm an Eagles fan, and oh my, the Eagles lost to the Dallas Cowboys in the first round of the playoffs, and then the Cowboys won the Super Bowl. So if the Eagles would have just won that one game, they would have won the Super Bowl. It doesn't go. And in comics, things are all over the place, so it's weird. But if you want to know who is the strongest character, a poof of smoke, Rush Limbaugh shows up. He looks even sexier and in better shape than he did before. He has a glowing microphone that ends up shooting all three of the heroes, who then get knocked out. And Rush explains himself. I got good at turning on these nut jobs. Now I had to learn how to turn them off. And they're like, thanks. Al says, with great power comes, and Mickey tells him to shut up. Well, the police show up to take the heroes downtown, but also seem to be leading all these people who are just getting beaten up into the paddy wagon as well. And this woman officer named Lucy comes over to take a statement from Al and Mickey. And you end up having Al just saying, hey, those guys were jerks, but seeing them do that, I think I want to be a crime fighter. I want to use my powers. Mickey says he doesn't have them, but Lucy, the cop, says, oh, cool powers. And then he says, well, with great responsibility, gets cut off again. And then you end up with the cop, Lucy, and her partner, a guy who we'll meet in a second, saying, hey, you guys are pretty cool. You have $200 million. Why don't you hang with us? And they go to the donut shop. At the donut shop, you end up having Mickey notice or recognize the male cop and says, hey, aren't you that guy from Barney Miller? Again, must mean Hal Linden. All the kids were talking about Hal Linden in 2002, right? Hal Linden? Doesn't look like him either. So they end up sitting down and they're discussing what policemen do. And then, Al wants to know, hey, what goes on with policemen, nowadays? And they say, well, what we do is we eat donuts, and then we also go and throw homeless people in jail and beat them up. And also, get this, we arrive late at crime scenes. That's what we do. Isn't it great? It's awesome being a cop. And Al thinks that is great, but I want to take down the big crime boss of the New York City, the city. And they say, how would you do that? He says, I have a plan. Now, none of this is spelled out. And for this whole thing, Bill Jemas has no idea how to write a comic book. He doesn't explain anything. Transitions are awful. You don't know what's going on. So you end up, the plan, it just says later. So the plan is, and they kind of go with it, you end up having Mickey and Lucy, the female cop. They're dressed as hookers. It says, we're dressed as hookers. Yes. I'm dressed as Al. I'm dressed as a tourist. All right. Hal Linden, he's just Hal Linden. He doesn't change. But they say, hey, what we're going to do is we're going to send you to. Now, they dress them up as hookers. But the whole thing of this is not to go and hook. It's to go and buy pot off of a guy who's standing at the corner talking to what appears to be a businessman and a yuppie. And also in the roundabout deal that's never explained, this is the guy that Batman bonked on the head and ended up making into Quato. He's not that anymore. He's just a guy, but it's the guy. Same clothes, everything. There he is. He's selling pot. So what you're going to do is you're going to go buy some pot and arrest that guy. Why do they have to be dressed as hookers? I have no idea. They do not go away from it. The rest of the issue, and we're halfway through, the rest of the issue, they are dressed as hookers for no apparent reason. Well, they then say, when the guy sells you pot, you throw water on him. And then we'll get him to be state's evidence. And I'm sitting there thinking, Bill Jemas, what the hell does he think this world is about? The idea, what is he watching? Is this something that actually happened on Barney Miller and we don't know? Go buy pot from him, arrest him, throw water over him, and then make him turn state's evidence. That's the plan, people. So you go off and you don't see any of that. He's just, the next thing, they're in the police station where Lucy Hooker is leading this guy into a room that just says over top state's evidence. You don't want to go in that room. You don't want to be seen going in that room, really. But he's going in, where you end up then having Al and Mickey talk about crime. How's crime in the future? How's crime 3,000 years from now, Al? And he says, we don't have crime. Why? Because we don't have possessions. Then you get Mickey seemingly starting to quote John Lennon's Imagine, where Al cuts him off and it's like, nah, we sold everything to AOL. And she says, well, what did you get for that? And he says, stock. This is a whole page of wasted life. I don't care about that. I want my life back, Bill Jemas, you idiot. Then you turn. Now, this is also the best. I'm reading this digitally, okay? So you have a spread page. This is a full spread page. The problem is I have looked at different ways that it never lined up. You ended up having this spread page that does not line up any sort of way I've ever seen it. I've even seen somebody showing a copy of this book in the print form. And I'm not saying like the staples are off. I'm not saying that no, the art does not line up, but it is a spread page that also doesn't make any damn sense, because what you end up having then is the guy who's already been led into state's evidence. He's now being pulled by Lucy the hooker cop. He's wearing a dog collar. She has the dog leash. She leads him over to get his fingerprints. To take his fingerprints, he has to get down on his knees in a very, very sexual position, where she then gets the ink on his fingers, but then says, oh no, I smudged some ink on my hands, lick it off. And he starts doing that like a dog. He's now licking the ink off of Lucy Hooker police officer's hands, saying, that's good, you bad boy. So she takes him then and takes him to the jail cell, the holding cell. Okay. You put him in the holding cell, you close it, you leave him in there until he's called. Well, there's a bunch of other guys in this cell. They're all handcuffed. They're all standing around. When Lucy walks away, Lucy Hooker, police officer, walks away, and these guys are on their own, they then light candles and start slow dancing and making out. And then one of the guys sitting there thinking, that's good, you bad boy. And then the next panel, they're just standing there again, and it makes no sense, okay? You got that. So then that's the middle stretch deal. On the bottom, you now again have Lucy Hooker cop leading this guy with the dog collar leash to his lawyer. His lawyer is Matt Murdock. You can see this. He's not spelled out completely yet, but it is. And Matt Murdock takes him. He gets him over. They're going to go into the courtroom. But to go into the courtroom, it looks as if you have to, even Matt Murdock, a lawyer, you have to punch a card to get in. But to punch a card, you got to get down on your knees and put it in your mouth and then start, punching that. And yeah, And so that it gets worse. Then you go into the courtroom where the where the judge is there reading a paper, and you have all the lawyers lined up on their knees in front of him, and he says, "Time for oral arguments, you bad boys." And then you see Matt Murdock taking the handcuffs off this guy, and he's free. That's the progression. That's a spread page. And so this bad guy, he's leaving. He walks by Al. Al says, "Is that you?" He says, "Yes, I'm with my lawyer. I'm out of here." Then they start arguing with Matt Murdock about, the things of, you're letting a bad guy out. Now, again, we really didn't see what this guy was doing. He's been getting the crap kicked out of him, too, by Batman, all that. Matt Murdock says to Mickey, dressed as a hooker, "You're so beautiful, you young thing." And then Mickey says, "You're supposed to be blind. How did you know I'm young?" And he says, "I have a sixth sense for beauty." Then he tries to grope her. And then she says, "I know you're not blind. You just want sympathy from the judge." And then he says, "We got off on the wrong foot." Mickey says, "I don't think you have feet because you just slither." And then he ends up leaving. And as he leaves, they start yelling at him that he's bullcrap and he lets people out of jail that should be in jail. And he says everybody deserves a break. And then they say, "Yeah, with the proper lawyer fee attached." And then, you just keep going. It's now, again, Bill Jemas, what grinds his gears. Well, you end up with this whole idea at this point now where Matt Murdock is leaving. You have Al go up to him and says, "You ended up letting that guy go. He was going to be state's evidence, and he was going to let us know the name of the big boss, the big crime boss." Matt Murdock says, "You mean the kingpin?" And then Al says, "Yeah, we were going to get the name of that guy. We were going to find out who it is." Matt says, "You mean the kingpin of crime?" Yeah, we're never going to know the name now. And then he ends up, Matt says, "Well, why don't you go get him?" You end up having Al say, "Who?" Matt says, "Who's on first?" Kingpin is the boss. Then you end up having Al say, "What?" And then Matt says, "What's on second?" And then you go from there. And that's just there. Just, again, 2002. We're going to do the old Abbott and Costello to get the kids in. Is this guy, was he shocked that this book didn't last and didn't win the contest? I mean, really? So they go out. And this is the other thing is this book is so bad. I hope you realize when me and Eric go through a book, or I go through a book, me and Brandon go through a book, you can skip around. A lot of times a page will have, a theme to it. You can be like, "Oh yeah." And then they go to Wakanda and Black Panther tells them they're bullshit and to get out, right? You have that. You don't have to go through each panel. In something this bad, you almost you're tricked or forced into because it's so bad that you don't want to miss all the bad. So they go outside and they're going to go get the Kingpin. They have to figure out where he is. Now they know the name, Kingpin. Who's on first? What's on second? I don't know who's on third. You end up where they go out. They're still trying to figure things out. Now, I guess, other clothes are not available because still Lucy, cop hooker, Mickey, hooker. They're dressed as hookers still. Nobody's mentioning it. They didn't change. Well, somebody's going to mention it in the middle because they see Spider-Man. Oh, my God, Spider-Man would know where Kingpin's headquarters are. He's in the know. He'll know that. And Spider-Man is walking an old lady across the street. She's there with her little, walker, cane, the one with she doesn't have the, tennis balls on it, but it's the one with the 4 feet. She's going. She seems very happy. Spider-Man's helping. So they all go running, and they're going to ask Spider-Man if he knows where the Kingpin's headquarters are. Now, in the meantime, Lucy, the hooker police officer, says, "Oh, no, it's that menace Spider-Man. I'm going to arrest him." She runs over, yells, "Freeze!" And the old lady says, Whoa. Before you have sex with this guy, let me go across the street. Spider-Man's helped me across the street. Let me go and, we'll finish this. Then you can blow him. It's basically what she says. And then Lucy says, "I'm not a hooker. I'm a pig." And so that's where Spider-Man then, and that kind of dies. And then Spider-Man's like, "Hey, what's up?" And they're like, we want to know where the Kingpin's headquarters are. Do you know? He says, yeah, but I'm coming with you. That sounds cool. They go off. Kingpin's headquarters are a bowling alley, Kingpin Lanes. You see it there. They're like, man, this doesn't look like a headquarters. And then Spider-Man says, well, it's just a front. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, which we've seen all of this here, this whole bowling alley, everything, all of a sudden now it has a huge, giant, Empire State Building attached to it that just says Kingpin's headquarters. And I guess the joke is that you should have been able to see this all along, but the heroes are dumb. Who knows? Well, they're going to go into this. Punisher shows up, starts shooting them all, saying that that's what I do. I shoot, ask questions later. Hey, but we're innocent. I don't care. I'm going to shoot you. That's what I do. I'm the Punisher, repeats it ad nauseum. And then they say, well, we're going to get Kingpin. Oh, I am too. I am going to crash open the side door and I'm going to fight my way through. So he goes off. Spider-Man says, I'm going to swing up and I'm going to crash through a window. He goes off. Al says, I'm going to go through that air vent and go all the way up Die Hard style. And then, all right, he goes and does that. Hookers, Mickey and police officer Hooker, Lucy just say, doorbell? And they ring the door and a guy answers and it's an Italian guy. You can see that at least. And they say, hey, aren't you that guy from The Sopranos? And he says, yeah, I was typecast. Come on in. And it doesn't look like anybody from The Sopranos at all. They go in and take the elevator up. As they get there, you end up having the Punisher busting out of the stairwell that he has destroyed now. You have Spider-Man smash through the window, and you have Al come out of the ventilation shaft. And yeah, that's a joke as well. So they go, okay, how do we get into the Kingpin's office, which just has a big sign, the Kingpin? You have Al say, let's rock. Spider-Man says, let's swing. Punisher said, let's blast. And the hookers say, let's knock, which they do. They knock, they go in, and it's the classic scene where the Kingpin is sitting at his desk, but the chair is swung the other way. We see the back of the chair. He appears to be looking out his spacious windows there, the skyline. And, hey, Mr. Kingpin, can we talk? Yes, may I help you? And they said, yeah, we came to maybe try to tell you to stop doing crime. And, we'd like you to stop. Punisher says, pretty much we insist or I'm going to shoot you. And then the Kingpin, still not turning around, says, people commit crimes because they're hungry or hopeless or disenfranchised. That's why so many black people fall into lives of crime. At least white kids have some hope. They can see that path that other whites have taken to success. The only light a black kid sees leads into a sports arena, and when that fails for 99.99999% of them, they have no hope at all. And then Punisher says, whatever, I want to punish somebody. And the Kingpin continues, I'm just one man. I do get things organized, and I make a little pocket money in the process, but I can't stop crime. Nobody can, but everyone can. And then he swings around, and it's Spike Lee. And he says, now get your flabby white butts out of my space. And they're like, wait a minute, you're Spike Lee. You're not the Kingpin. That's not the Kingpin. And he says, what do you mean? What, I can't be the Kingpin? Why can't I be the Kingpin? And then, Punisher's like, I've seen the Kingpin. He's just a big fat white guy. You're not a big fat white guy. And then Spike Lee says, oh, so a black man's not allowed to play the Kingpin. And they kind of go back and forth with each other for a second. And then they leave. They're like, well, all right. They don't even talk about like, well, I guess he can or can't. It's just there. And then ends. And then they leave. And also, I say leave. Lucy, Hooker, police officer, gone. Punisher, gone. Spider-Man, gone. Everybody's gone. Just Al and Mickey walking out and then says, man, my life feels like a Marvel comic book. And then Mickey says, how does that make you feel? Stupid. And then I don't like this crime fighting. I think I need to find something else for my powers. And then she's like, you don't have powers. Then we go to the future where Ted and Jane, Ted Turner and Jane Fonda are talking, and it's one of the only jokes that I like here in this whole thing is Ted says to Jane, I was thinking, and Jane says, again? That was pretty funny. Just, I don't know. I bet you that wasn't even a joke. But he's like, I know how we can help our son. Now, remember, if you listen to the awful version of the first episode of this with the first issue, they ended up sending Al back in time. And the whole deal was, well, he can come back anytime he wants, right? No, he doesn't have a time machine. The time machine didn't go with him. It just ended up sending him back. And, so he doesn't have a machine himself, but we can send him things. We can send him, and they did. They send him underwear at the end of the last issue, things like that. So because I have an idea, we can send him something pretty good. And they send him a time machine. You don't have anything to do. This book is so freaking awful. And now you're so stuck with anything that just imagine the idea where we talk, even Joshua Williamson right now, he does a lot of time travel stuff in his Flash book. And we kind of saying, he's getting a little wonky with it. But just think the wonkiness of a time machine sends you back in time, but you're stuck in that time because you don't have a time machine. And then you get sent a time machine to go through time to go the time machine. And that's what they do. They send him a time machine, as Al is saying to Mickey, still dressed as a hooker. I'm starting to have, a crisis here, a crisis of conscience. I don't know what's going on. I need to figure out things. I need, I've been talking about, dressing ladies up as hookers and throwing water on pot dealers. That didn't work out. End up giving money to Peter David, the drunk jerk comic book writer, but that only got me yelled at by Rush Limbaugh. We ended up trying to convince Batman, Iron Man, and Black Panther to, distribute the wealth a little. We were called liberals and almost killed. Thank God Rush saved us that time, right? You know what I'm saying, right? Then we ended up getting the pot guy arrested, but then he was let out of jail, and there was a lot of maybe blowskis going on involved in that too. This guy, so I need to figure out the meaning of life. I need to figure out, what is God's purpose in all of this? And what is our purpose to God? Oh, there's a time machine. Looks like we're going to go and find God at the Big Bang. That's what it is. It's so bad. It's so bad. It's awful. I just hope that you at least had some fun listening. I end up, and I'm telling you right now, with all the stuff going on in comics and this whole, fight that became a big thing again, the Comicsgate, anti-Comicsgate thing, and also just, behind the curtain or whatever the deal, have a bunch of people quitting the Patreon with the sole reason of saying, I just don't like comics anymore. The last three people, because if you do quit, they have an exit survey, and I will stress, hopefully nobody listening to this will be quitting anytime soon. But if you do, I do stress that, you have an exit survey. Don't use that to try to, I don't want to upset Jim, because I'm going to be upset either way. But if you are stopping for a reason, if you're like, well, I don't read the comics anymore, let me know. If you end up saying, Eric's a jerk and he should get slapped in the face, I may just go and slap him in the face. But I want to improve everything as well. And sometimes, that sort of thing ends up, kind of not being a discussion. It's just, okay, I'm going to listen to this and I'll quit, even though if I have reason, just let me know. Because a lot of people are quitting. We had, I said, the last three people who quit, legitimately, all of them said the same thing. It's not a choice, too. You have to write it in. This is a write-in vote of, I don't like anything DC's doing now, so I haven't been listening and this and that. Now, again, I thought that's why we do, a podcast like this one. The idea of let's get everybody, if we're not enjoying the regular books, let's have some fun with some older stuff. Let's talk about some stuff that this one's about being bad, but let's talk about some good stuff as well, like the back issues and things like that. But I see that some people, if they're not enjoying the current books, they just lose interest in comics in general, and it stinks. But even some of them are getting upset and saying, this whole comic book fandom thing is becoming too polarizing. It's becoming too miserable. There's too many fights going on and things like that, and that's not great either. So I hope that this podcast can be at least enjoyable. We can laugh and have some fun together and whatever. But yeah, Yeah, kind of depressed right now, but this issue depressed me in a good way. It depressed me in a way of like, thank God we don't have that. That's why I want anybody who, if anybody does say, man, we need some of them old comics back, like, woo-wee, and say, yeah, you'll get this crap then. Because I love the, rose-tinted glasses of, I love the comics in the quote-unquote, any era here, insert years here, because there's always shitty comics. That's what there always is. You just have to find the good ones as well. So we'll just keep on keeping on. Just keep doing what you're doing. Like my grandfather said, I wish he was alive so I could punch him right in the face. That would make me feel a lot better. That's the sort of kind spirit that I'm right now. I wish that my dead grandfather could come back so I could punch him. And really, that would be pretty much something that might happen in this Marville at some point. That seems like a hook that maybe the Bill Jemas writing class would give you. And the hook, that's what brings you back. So Blues Traveler said that. All right, everybody, I'm going to go. Thank you. Thank you for letting me rant and rave at the end of this. And I will talk to you later.